By now, you know the Bengals called their rival Cleveland Browns for a quarterback. It ain't who you thought it was, but it is going to give them a little bit of hope. We'll talk about that here on Locked On NFL.
The barbershop is open and Tony Wiggins has a chair for you. He's ready with some real NFL talk. The local experts of Locked On bring their expertise, and Wiggy is ready with his clippers and shears. Sit down and enjoy. The new Locked On NFL starts now. Locked On Podcast Network. Your team every day.
That's a fact, Jack. It is your team every day here on Locked On NFL. We thank you for making us your first listen. It's Wednesday here, so you know that means David Harrison from Locked On Commanders joins us as we navigate around the National Football League with the use of local experts that keep our finger on the pulse of the team and can give you an idea of what all of these teams are going through. We'd like to thank the everydayers for joining us each and every day because they know exactly where to get our podcast, and that is wherever you watch or listen. And any newcomers, we welcome you in to this episode also that is brought to you by FanDuel. Right now, new customers can bet just $5, and if your bet wins, you'll get $300 in bonus bets across the app. Thank you for listening to Locked On NFL. Reminder that you can follow our show and hear new episodes ad-free daily on Amazon Music, so go check that out. All right, it's time for me to tell you how we're going to navigate this show. I'll tell you where we're going to end up before I tell you where we'll start. That is the former Lions coordinators. We're going to get a little update, see how those dudes are doing. We're talking so much about the Lions and whether they could survive without them. Can those guys survive without the Lions? That's the question. Teams who surprisingly lost in surprising fashion. That does not include the Kansas City Chiefs. That was not a surprise to somebody sitting right here. Everything happened the way it was going to happen with the Chiefs. We'll start with the Bengals and the Browns, though, making a deal for a quarterback. And on the surface, that would seem like Shedeur. They traded for Shedeur. No, they traded for a dude that's old enough to be Shedeur's daddy. That is Joe Flacco. Dave, desperation makes you do crazy things, doesn't it?
It does. It does. But, you know, this is actually a move that I'll applaud the Bengals for, right? Like this is clearly a move, and that's why you don't go after a guy like Shedeur Sanders or anything like that, because you're just looking for a guy to keep the boat afloat, right? We talk about bridge quarterbacks. Well, this is a buoy quarterback. Joe Flacco is the buoy quarterback. Just try to keep the Bengals relevant long enough for Joe Burrow to come back. Like there's the obviously the talk of, you know, can Joe come back? You know, I think it all has to hinge on whether or not the Bengals are really in the playoff hunt. And I don't even mean mathematically eligible to make the playoffs. When the time comes for Joe Burrow to return, the Bengals have to have a really honest conversation about, are we contenders or are we just not mathematically eliminated yet? Because if you're just not mathematically eliminated, there's no reason to bring Joe Burrow back. There's no reason to put him back out there in harm's way, mess around, get another injury, and end up being gone for all of 2026. And now you might as well just punt on that season as well. So I think Joe Flacco's the perfect type of quarterback. If it wasn't him, Kirk Cousins, Russell Wilson, something like that. But look, if Shedeur Sanders comes in here and the Cincinnati Bengals are mathematically and real world relevant, let's be honest with you, even with Joe Burrow, you're going to have people in Cincinnati talking about, is Shedeur the next answer? And with all of Joe Burrow's injuries, should they just pivot to Shedeur forever? So, yeah, trading for a young quarterback doesn't make any sense, even if you don't think that would have actually happened, which I don't. But trading for an older vet, there's no threat here to Joe Burrow's, you know, future with the Cincinnati Bengals. So it was a good move to make. We know that Joe Flacco, he can make these things happen. He's done it with the Cleveland Browns before. Certainly he's playing with a better overall team in Cincinnati than he did that with in Cleveland. Even with some of the teams he played for with the Baltimore Ravens, you know, he's had some success with lesser talented teams. So I think it was a good move for Cincy. And I think that when you're talking about being, 4 games from the trade deadline, it was a smart move to make right now. Don't wait. Don't sit around hoping things get better, because now you've got 4 weeks with Joe Flacco. I think they only have 3 games in that stretch. I could be wrong about their bye week, but you've got 3 or 4 games now with Joe Flacco to figure out exactly where you're going to be when the trade deadline comes around. Because when that deadline comes around, there's specifically one player, Trey Hendrickson, that if the Bengals are on their way out of this thing anyway, you're not going to bring Trey Hendrickson back next year. It doesn't look like. You might as well go ahead and see if you can't just trade him for a 3rd or a 4th round pick, depending on what's going on. Get some draft capital back for him now instead of getting that compensatory pick in 2027. That'll help you come back in 2026 stronger with a healthy Joe Burrow.
You know who traded for him, and we've heard it from the perspective of the Bengals. Might as well hear it from David because David and Locked On Bengals, they like cousins. So it's all good the way that they go back and forth with each other. So we'll hear from Spencer German now from the Cleveland Browns and Locked On Browns, a team that actually dispensed themselves of Joe Flacco.
Just when I thought I was going to be able to enjoy just a nice, quiet Tuesday, I got some grocery shopping done, was getting some stuff done around the house. Nope. Browns, never a dull moment here in Cleveland. And the Browns pull off a notable trade that shakes up the quarterback room once again because they have sent Joe Flacco and a 6th-round pick in the division to the Cincinnati Bengals for a 5th-round pick. Pretty big in terms of what this means now for the quarterback room. We know Dylan Gabriel was just named the starter last week. Browns clearly going to continue rolling with him at least for the foreseeable future. What does it mean behind him? Well, right now, sure, Sanders is the only other active quarterback on the roster, but I'm assuming that they might elevate Bailey Zappi from the practice squad, or you always got to keep in mind here that Deshaun Watson is always lurking in the shadows. And
Ooh. Spencer was on a roll until he mentioned Deshaun Watson, and I look up and saw my man David shaking his head. I can't even talk about Shador because now we got to, first of all, great job by Spencer German to Locked On Browns. Go ahead, David. Tell me why you're shaking your head, man.
I mean, look, Deshaun's there. Got it. You know what I mean? He's recovering from the injury, all that stuff. But, man, if you're the Cleveland Browns, like you've already been down that road. Look, you got 2 young quarterbacks that at least have some sort of talent, some sort of ceiling. Deshaun Watson has no ceiling for you. Like you've gone down that road, you tried it, it didn't work. Just let it go, and either roll with Dylan Gabriel, give him the opportunity to prove himself, or if for whatever reason it just all falls apart, see what Shador Sanders has. And worst case scenario, you're looking at another quarterback next year. Best case scenario, you figure out that one of these 2 guys is worth moving forward with. But just let the other part just die, man. Just unplug it, just let it go. Just don't even.
Yeah. With Shador. I'm glad he's closer to getting an opportunity to play. At least that's what appears on the surface.
Yeah.
I'm gonna be honest with you. We do this for a living. Like we all have favorite players. We have guys that we like in the draft that we think are good. I thought Shador was way better than Dylan Gabriel. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
But they didn't pick him, right? They didn't pick him. We can talk about all these conspiracy theories all day. I just find it hard for me to sit in here in an objective seat and go, Shador's getting closer without thinking that means that a kid either got to get hurt or he has to fail in order for that to happen. And I don't know either one of them personally. So for me to sit here and just try to keep pushing that and pushing that and pushing that, and I want people to really understand this. I can't do it based on what my feelings are. I have to do it on what Cleveland has prioritized. That's our job. It's not our job to sit up here and root for people and be a jukebox just because we may have relationships with folks. That being said, I see right now what some of the problem is. If Shador does well, it's him. If he doesn't do well, they're setting him up for failure. I've seen it here with Travis Hunter. Some of the same fan bases. I see it every single day. I'm a Travis Hunter fan and defended him. And the Jaguars are 4-1, had the best win they've had in a long time. And I had people just today, a day or 2 days, 2 days after this big victory, when Travis Hunter played well, it was the highest rated player on offense and defense for the Jaguars on that night. And they're sitting there pushing the narrative that somehow the Jags are holding them back and sabotaging. It just gets on my nerves, and I can understand why anybody doesn't want anything to do with that. Now, mind you, it's not Travis. It's just these other people who love him, and I understand it, man, but it can get a little bit ridiculous.
Yeah. No, I mean, you never hold a narrative against the kid, right? Because the kid doesn't create their own narrative unless they're out there embracing the narrative and try to push it forward. I mean, this is a little bit unrelated, but Arch Manning is a prime example. The Athletic, look, the Athletic, generally speaking, does a very good job and all that stuff. But the Athletic put out an article, and the headline is, how did Arch Manning go from this #1 overall prospect, Heisman favorite, to being like synonymous with losing? It's like, hold up, like y'all are the ones, and not just the Athletic, right? But like the media, we are the ones who made Arch Manning a Heisman preseason favorite before he ever took a snap as a starting quarterback in big-time college football. We're the ones that made him the projected #1 overall draft pick before he ever took a starting snap as a quarterback at the University of Texas, not Arch Manning. And, as far as I'm concerned or aware, Arch Manning also isn't out here trying to pump up the hype and do all those things either. So, narratives are a nasty thing, and, it's one of the worst parts of the business. But like you said, just try to keep it real, right? And at the end of the day, like Dylan Gabriel, I think he did a pretty good job, for his first NFL opportunity and all that stuff. I mean, is he going to be the next great Browns quarterback? I don't know, like who was the last great Browns quarterback, but
Right.
it's certainly there's some talent there. I'm with you. Like draft weekend, when I saw Dylan Gabriel come off the board before Shador, I was like, okay, that's the moment where this was about personality. You know what I mean? This was about personality, and then all the interview stuff started coming out and all that stuff. And look, it kind of makes sense if all that is true. But if you want to ask who's the best, athletically talented quarterback on the Browns roster, I would probably lean Shador. But if you want to know who the best quarterback is for the franchise, well, again, personality matters when you're the quarterback of an NFL franchise. So I can't answer that because I'm not in Cleveland. But Dylan Gabriel getting the opportunity first, that's how it should be because he's the guy you drafted first.
That's right. You'd be hustling backwards if you did anything different, and you look incompetent. Some say they might still look incompetent. We'll talk about two teams who surprisingly lost. Maybe that they lost and how they lost. We'll do it in just a second here on Locked On NFL. All right, as you heard at the top, today's show is brought to you by FanDuel. Man, look, it is week 5, and I hope you've been in on the action because FanDuel has an offer you don't want to miss. Right now, new customers can bet just $5 and get $300 in bonus bets if you win. That's right. Pick a bet, put down $5, and if it hits, you unlock $300 in bonus bets to use across the app. Now, it's no joke, man, because FanDuel gives you a lot of information, what they call pre-snap. That's what I call it anyway. Pre-snap information. It gives you the injury reports, tells you who's hurting, tells you the tendencies, lets you know, even sometimes you can look up the history of these teams and find out, like I found out about the Rams and 49ers last week. It is a rivalry and anything could happen. So what are you waiting for? Visit FanDuel.com to download the FanDuel app today and make sure you get started. First $5 bet, if you win, $300 in bonus bets is coming to you. All right, moving along here with my man David Harrison. A couple of surprising losses last week. And nothing can really surprise you in the NFL. But when you're playing a team that's all banged up and you're the Rams and you got this chip on your shoulder because you lost a very, very close game. That was your revenge game already against the Eagles. I don't expect you to come out against Mac Jones and play the way that they played last week, man. But listen to Locked On Rams and let you know.
An absolute catastrophe at SoFi Stadium where the Rams just let one opportunity after the next slip through their fingers. Missed field goals, blocked field goals, dropped passes, killer fumbles, and then an absolutely bizarre decision to go for it on 4th and 1 from the 11-yard line as opposed to kick the field goal. We're all over it on Locked On Rams coming up tomorrow, but just an absolute catastrophe at SoFi.
Sean McVay is one of my favorite coaches.
Yep.
I was sitting in a bar in Raleigh. I was out of town last week because the Jaguars played on Monday, and I didn't have to be around. Sitting in a bar in Raleigh, and this Jamaican dude says, they got to be point shaving. I almost fell out of my seat, man, because when somebody says something like that, now they weren't point shaving, obviously.
Right.
But when somebody says something like that, it just has to be a whole bunch of ridiculousness going on it. And it was. I'm sitting there I cannot believe the mistakes that they kept making.
Yeah, I mean, look, the fourth down attempt. I think, the way you explain that, and I'm going to assume that Sean McVay probably has said it since then, is, I mean, you look at what the Rams have done on special teams. I mean, their kicker has missed 5 kicks this season. They had an extra point blocked in that very game. They missed a field goal in that very game. It's a lack of confidence in your kicking operation. You know what I mean? Whether it comes from the snap, the hold, the kick, or the blocking, like it's all got to be sound. If one part of it is off, the entire operation fails. And it's biting the Rams in the butt. It's part of the reason they've lost, both the games they've lost this season. Special teams has played a significant role in losing that game. And I think that if you're the Rams, what really hurts is you look at where you've lost games and you can literally say you've defeated yourself. Like every team kind of walks away saying, oh, we beat ourselves more than they beat us, things like that. That's kind of the thing to say. But more often than not, you actually look at the other side and say, no, they just beat you for whatever reason. This is a game where the Los Angeles Rams are going to walk away or have walked away and say, we beat ourselves. I mean, you look at, just 4 points left on the field alone in the missed kicks. And then you look at 3 more points left on the field because you didn't go for the kick. So that's 7 points left on the field because of kicking problems. In this game, you should have won that game. Go back to the Eagles game. Again, you should have won that game. Like these are problems that are serious. We never talk about the third phase of football until it becomes a problem. for the Rams is a problem. And I'll tell you, man, it can cost them an opportunity to win this division, and it could cost them an opportunity to win a Super Bowl, because they are, to me, one of the better teams in the NFC. It reminds me, Wig, a lot of what's going on with the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. Look at the Tampa Bay Buccaneers special teams. They're not having a good time either. Now, their kicker has made some clutch kicks. They've got blocked punts. They've got all kinds of issues going on, to the point where some people are wondering why their special teams coordinator still has a job, because apparently he has a history of having units that get a lot of things blocked. So, the special teams are absolutely critical to this game. And when you don't have solid special teams operations, you really feel the strain of it. The Rams have done it twice.
Got more blocks than a thirsty follower on social media, huh? I'm telling you, man. Listen, you mentioned the team that benefited from them doing that, one of them anyway. But then they got their comeuppance too. Philadelphia hadn't been playing well, but they've been winning. So, you just kind of blow it off and excuse it. Yeah, okay. Until Sean Payton gets there and makes you pay for all that foolishness you've been doing. Listen to Lou DiBiase talk about the Eagles game.
Well, the Philadelphia Eagles' inability to close games out in the second half on offense finally came back to bite them. They blow a 17-3 lead in the second half and lose this football game by a score of 21-17 to the Denver Broncos, dropping to 4-1 on the season. Let's face it, the Eagles have lost their superpower that won them a championship in 2024. They were unbeatable when they had leads in the second half. Why? Because they were able to run the football, control time of possession, and simply put, not give the other team the ball back. They have not been able to run the football this year. I don't know what's going on with the Eagles' offensive line and Saquon Barkley. I don't think they're healthy. The scheme doesn't look very creative. In the passing game, they just can't put together a four-quarter performance. An incredible first half, just like last week against Tampa Bay. And in the second half, the defense had to be on the field pretty much the entire half because the Eagles' offense could not maintain drives. And until that changes, this is going to be an inconsistent football team.
So I heard A.J. Brown, Jalen Hurts, and Saquon Barkley had a meeting that lasted 2 hours. I hope they figured it out because I got Saquon Barkley on my fantasy team. I don't know what's going on with them. And I can start to sense that there's a little bit of Devontae Smith is real quiet. He's talking. That's a problem.
Yeah. I mean, it's the same thing, right? Like they say winning fixes everything, and it really does. But what winning really does, winning makes us forget everything. Like, and fortunately for me, I haven't forgotten. We talked about this all last year.
We did.
The Philadelphia Eagles were only as good as they were because they had a running game that was absolutely unstoppable. It was just dominant. Saquon Barkley obviously is the centerpiece of that, but really what makes any running game go these days is your offensive line. So when your offensive line is banged up and you start losing key members of that, that's going to be a problem. Lane Johnson is, if not the best member of their offensive line, he is the 1A, or he's the 1B to their 1A. He's the T. Higgins to their Jamar Chase. And without him, and with him being banged up, and I applaud him for trying to play through some of these injuries and things like that, but without him, the vulnerability really shows. The lack of creativity is absolutely there. We talked about their new offensive coordinator in the offseason as well, and talk about these coordinator changes. We're going to talk about coordinator changes here in a little bit. Those things are incredibly significant. And I think the first 4 weeks of the season, any team is kind of learning who they are, right? You're not the 2024 Eagles. Like, you shouldn't expect the 2025 Eagles to just do what the 2024 Eagles did, because you're not the 2024 Eagles. But you got to figure out who you are as a 2025 Philadelphia Eagles team. And right now, who you are is you're a team that can't run the ball as consistently and dominantly as you want to, but you're also not a team that has a quarterback capable of throwing the ball at a level that you want him to. And this is where you get called a Jalen Hurts hater. You forgot he's a Super Bowl and MVP. Okay, but you forgot the Super Bowl is one game. It's a huge game. It's the most important game of the season. Got it, but it's one game. And just because you go out there and have one really good game, look at Mac Jones, look at Bailey Zappi, the Cleveland Browns might be doing that. You can look at a whole lot of quarterbacks in the National Football League that have gone out there and just lit it up for an entire game. Doesn't mean they're the best in the league. Doesn't mean they're one of the best in the league. Doesn't even mean they're one of the best in your franchise's history. Jalen Hurts is a very talented player. He is not an elite passer. He is not an elite quarterback. He never has been. When you stop the Eagles' run game, you force him to be exactly that, and it's not what he is. And that's what happens, and you see it happen against opponents that actually can rise up to your level. Also doesn't help that A.J. Brown is back there playing defensive back on a Hail Mary attempt to win the game. That's a different conversation.
None of that stuff. Somebody said, I had to ask some of my wide receiver buddies. I said, look, when A.J. Brown came out of that break and he was running wide open, did he really slow down? They said, yeah, he slowed down. I said, is there a reason? He said, yeah, there's a reason. Because what if the quarterback is scrambling? You can be wide open. He can't get you the ball. You got to turn around and look and see what's going on with him, because you could actually outrun him to the point where you could be so open he can't hit you because he's running for his life, either in a different direction or he's had to reverse out. You got to look back and find out if you need to give a guy a target. There's a reason why the defensive back didn't go with him. So there's different ways to look at it, but I tell you what, they better get it together, because if they don't, we're going to be talking about them in a bad way. Losing coordinators does matter, and you spoke about it. We talked all of this offseason about the Lions lost with coordinators, and could they adapt? Yeah, they adapted. All right. They look like the best team in the NFC. We'll discuss the teams that got those coordinators to be head coaches in just a second here on Locked On NFL.
I'm Cody Rourke from Locked On Broncos, and this episode is brought to you by Peloton. Peloton is shaping the future of fitness with the brand new Peloton Cross-Training Tread Plus, powered by Peloton IQ. This is Peloton's most advanced equipment yet, giving you real-time guidance and endless ways to move, whether you're running, lifting, or you're cross-training with your favorite instructors like Alex Toussaint. It's training reimagined to make your workout more personal. Peloton is built for breakthroughs. With features that help you plan, stay motivated, and hit peak performance, you can let yourself run, lift, flex, and go, while Peloton handles all the rest. Plus, Peloton IQ provides real-time strength coaching, tracking your progress and suggesting weights that challenge you so you can get stronger. Plus, the new movement tracking camera, it counts your reps and corrects your form in real time, making sure every rep is safer and smarter. So let yourself run, lift, flex, push, and go. Explore the new Peloton Cross-Training Tread Plus at onepeloton.com.
All right, moving and grooving here in the third and final segment of Locked On NFL. Let's talk Lions, man. Detroit have gotten their act together, right? And everybody wondered if they would be missing their coordinators. But a bigger question is, would their coordinators miss them? Not just the talent, but the alignment that Brad Holmes obviously has with the coaching staff, the fact that they get guys that fit their personality. And if they didn't, how long would it take to have success? Let's go to Chicago first. And Lauren Cox from Locked On Bears will give you an idea of one of the biggest things that Chicago addressed and if they actually fixed it.
We spent all offseason talking about the Bears' offensive line upgrades and how much of a priority it was to rebuild the offensive line. And they traded for Joe Thuney and Jonah Jackson and signed Drew Dahlman in free agency and drafted a tackle in the second round. And we're in week 4, and offensive line still feels like maybe the biggest individual offensive issue.
Hey, look, the team that didn't get Ben Johnson, the Jacksonville Jaguars, have a very good offensive line with a very good running game and are not allowing their quarterback to get banged up. They went the cheaper route and signed like 3 players or 4 players for the same price that maybe the Chicago Bears gave up for just 1 or 2 of their guys, and it's worked out. Going big ain't always the best thing to do.
Listen, we just talked about expectation management. Wig, if I were to tell you the Jacksonville Jaguars improved their sacks per pass attempt rate by 7% in the first 5 games of the season from one season to the next, you'd say it's a pretty good improvement, right?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, that's what the Bears have done. The Bears are giving up sacks at 5% of their passes this year. They gave up sacks over 12% of their pass attempts last year. It was like almost dead last year in giving up sacks per pass attempt. This year, they're middle of the road. They're 14th overall in the NFL. That's a pretty good improvement. That's a pretty solid improvement. Is it still too much? Okay, sure. Everybody wants to be number 1 in that category, right? But it's pretty good. You know what I mean? And it can get better. Again, we just got done talking about this. Like the first 4 games of the year, I always kind of chalk it up to you're figuring out who you are. Well, when you have a new coaching staff and you got, everybody has a new roster. That's across the board. That doesn't matter. But when you have a new coaching staff, that time you might need 6-7 games to really figure out who you are. And this is the problem with teams like the Houston Texans. This is the problem like teams with the Washington Commanders. And then this is the problem with teams like the Indianapolis Colts this year, is that people look at those teams and say, no, this happens every year. There's a team that gets it together immediately. What's the matter with you? Well, the what's the matter with them is us not realizing that one team every year out of 32 getting it together like that, it's a terrible percentage. That's a terrible rate. That's a terrible, terrible percentage. It's terrible odds that another team is going to do it and that your favorite team is going to be the team to do it. 1 out of 32 pretty much every year does that. That's how amazing it is. Guess what? Indianapolis Colts, the number 1 sack rate per pass attempt right now in the National Football League. So you want to know why Danny Dimes looks like Danny Dimes, Indiana Jones, whatever? It's because he's finally getting protection. And any quarterback that's protected is going to be able to find an open receiver eventually. Any offensive line that's blocking as well as the Indianapolis Colts offensive line is going to create holes for running backs. And when you have a running back as talented, Jonathan Taylor, he's going to take advantage of it more than some of your other running backs are going to. That's why the Indianapolis Colts are winning, is because of the offensive line. The Chicago Bears, they made a lot of progress on the offensive line, but they went from worst in the league to middle of the league. That is a pretty significant jump in one season. The problem with, and I'm not saying this is what Lauren is doing per se in that 12-second clip that we just saw, but it's possible he is. I'll talk to him later this week. If your expectations were for Ben Johnson, to take the worst pass blocking offensive line, at least in sacks per pass attempt in the league, to the best in one offseason and in less than 5 full games, because we're having this reaction after the 5th game, I'd say the problem is you and your expectations. That's what I would say. No offense, but that's what I would say.
Offensive line isn't the problem for Aaron Glenn, who was the defensive coordinator, as he moved on to the Jets. At least I don't think so. Armand Membu was a home run selection by them, even though I think they did lose Elijah Vera Tucker to an injury. Their problem is on defense, and they got superstars on the back end and the middle end, especially on the defensive line, and they can't defend anybody. And John Butchko wants his pound of flesh. He says Aaron Glenn should get fired, but somebody should. Check this out.
If Aaron Glenn is retained for year 2, which I'm fully expecting, Steve Wilkes has got to go unless we see a dramatic improvement by this Jets defense over the remaining games, because this looks just like a mess. And there's nothing redeeming about the job Wilkes is doing right now. The scheme is horrible. It's not the big reason the Jets are losing, but it's not helping anything. This is a horrific defensive scheme. And look, maybe it's Glenn's scheme. Maybe Wilkes is just doing what Glenn wants. And maybe the situation is hopeless as long as Glenn's here on defense. But something's got to change on this defense.
I wonder when coaches forget how to coach. Kyle Shanahan fired him too after they went to the championship game in San Francisco. But he had a long, nice career with John Fox, running a base 4-3 defense in Carolina for a long, long time. And all of a sudden, it just always boggles my mind, like Vic Fangio. Everybody, what, did him and Vance Joseph forget how to coach, and then they were available? Miami Dolphins players were cheering when he left, and he was the hero in the Super Bowl. Sometimes I just don't understand whether it's a match with the current players, alignment to play complementary football, or do we once again just think that people could just show up and be who they are without thinking all of that?
I think it's a combination of things. I think it starts first and foremost with having the right personnel for your scheme, and then scheming for your personnel, right? And I think that's kind of the problem that's going on here, because this is the exact opposite situation where I would tell New York Jets fans you're 1,000% justified in being angry about what you're seeing, because the New York Jets were top 10 in every important defensive statistic last year, except for interceptions per pass attempt. They didn't get a lot of interceptions last year, but everything else, and I mean, they were like 14th against the run per game, but per rush attempt, they were top 10. It's just teams were playing with the lead so much that they ran so much that they're getting yards, and that rushing yards per game number is getting inflated because your offense wasn't putting up any production. Got it. They have the same problem this year on that side of the ball, but Aaron Glenn, you know what I mean? Like, you should at least be able to come in here as a defensive coach with your handpicked defensive coordinator and take a top 10, arguably, defense in the NFL and use it to kind of hold things on together while your offense tries to get things together. That has not happened, and that's why the New York Jets are the worst team in the NFL right now, and it's tragic. I think Wilkes, Glenn, whoever it is, I think their problem is they're not scheming for their players. They're wanting their players to fit their scheme, and I get it. You want to run your scheme. Everybody wants to drive their car the way that they want to drive their car, but man, if you don't have the players to do it, you have to figure out how to put them in the best position possible. That's why you get paid. That's why guys like me and Wig will always say, you know more about football than I do. But what sometimes is the truth, unfortunately, and Wig, you already know this, sometimes guys don't actually know more about football than other people. They just know more about their football. Like
Yeah.
you might know how to run a 4-3 cover 2 base defense more than anybody else, but you don't know how to run a cover 3. You don't know how to run a fire zone based defense. You don't know how to run a 3-4. You don't know how to run a 2-5. You don't know how to do any of that stuff. And if I put you in your sub package, you're just completely lost in the sauce because you have no idea what to do. That's where other people might be smarter than you. And that's what it's starting to look like with the New York Jets. Is basically we know what you want to do from your history, and we know how to manipulate that based on your personnel, and you're not adjusting. And it's sad to see because I had high hopes for Aaron Glenn, but brother, they haven't even intercepted a pass yet this year. And
yeah, it's pretty sad stuff, man. I got a buddy of mine who well, I wouldn't necessarily classify him as a buddy, but it's somebody that's a real good acquaintance that coached for 40 years. And they told me, he said the problem with a lot of coaches is, especially, he basically was talking about guys who played the game who now coach. He said, they don't realize you're not a player anymore. You have to be a teacher.
Yeah.
People teach different. Teaching isn't necessarily about what you are divesting of yourself and investing in other people. It is your ability to communicate and be able to extract the best out of them. And a lot of times folks forget that. That's why I always remind people play calling is not the only thing involved in coaching. In fact, you spend 3 hours a week play calling 17 times a year. It's 51 hours.
Play calling is the last part.
And you'll spend 51 hours in 3 days in the facility during the off season. So it's way more important than that. You can find out more about the National Football League by listening to Locked On NFL twice a day. Tyler Rowland early in the morning will wake you up like a double shot of espresso. You can slide right back here with me in the barbershop each and every day. We use the local experts to navigate us around the league so you know what's going on. Make sure you tap in to Locked On NFL. And we appreciate you spending 32 minutes with us today. We'll see you again tomorrow on the barbershop.